I'll come aboard the midnight last bus. It's gonna be a spooky ride.
"50 years ago on the Skeksis Ridge in Changsha 4, grave robbers were squatting on a mound. None of them uttered a word, staring fixedly at the Luoyang shovel on the ground. The tip of the shovel was smeared with the old soil that had just been brought up from underground. Strangely enough, this bit of soil was constantly oozing bright red liquid as if it had just been dipped in blood. We're in big trouble now." Old Smoky knocked his pipe on the ground and continued. "There is a blood corpse down there. If we're not careful, we might all end up buried down there. Are we going down or not?" "Just say yes or no, don't beat around the bush," said the one-eyed young man. "You are an old man with inconvenient legs and feet. You don't have to go down. My brother and I will go down. No matter what it is, we'll just shoot it." Instead of getting angry, Old Smoky laughed and said to a bearded man beside him, "Your second son is so reckless. He might get into trouble at any time. You should educate him more. In our line of work, it's not like having a pistol means we can get away with everything." The bearded man glared at the young man and said, "You brat! How dare you talk to your grandfather like that? When your grandfather was digging graves, you were still eating shit in your mother's belly. I don't think I am wrong. Reading our ancestors say that the blood corpse is a good thing. There must be a lot of treasures down there. If we don't go down, we'll miss out on a big haul. How dare you talk back?" The bearded man raised his hand to hit him, but Old Smoky blocked it with his pipe. "Don't hit him. Weren't you the same when you were young, like father, like son?" The one-eyed young man saw his father being scolded and couldn't help but lower his head and snicker. Old Smoky coughed and gave the one-eyed young man a knock on the head with his pipe. "What are you laughing at? Encountering a blood corpse is no small matter. Last time your second uncle dug up this thing in Luoyang, and now he's still crazy. We don't even know what happened to him. I'll go down first in a while. You follow me. Second son, you take the earth mole and bring up the rear. Third son, you don't go down. If all 4 of us go down, we won't be able to retreat in time if something goes wrong. You just hold on to the tail of the earth mole. When we shout from inside, you pull the things out." The youngest of the young men was not convinced. "I don't agree. You are being unfair. I'll tell my mother." Old Smoky laughed loudly. "Look at you, third son. Don't be so childish. Don't make a fuss. I'll let you touch a golden knife later." "I don't want you to let me touch it. I can touch it myself." The one-eyed second son got angry and grabbed the third son's ear. "You little rascal, are you looking for trouble? Do you want me to lose my temper?" The youngest young man seemed to have been beaten a lot on weekdays. When he saw his second brother really angry, he was so scared that he didn't dare to say a word. He just looked at his father for help, but his father had already gone to gather the tools. His second brother was now smug. "Why are you so unruly? This time even father won't help you. If you make any more noise, I'll twist your ear off." Old Smoky patted the second son's shoulder and shouted, "Boys, get your tools ready." With that, he started swinging a whirlwind shovel. Half an hour later, the robber hole had been dug so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen except for the second son, who came up to take a breath from time to time. The sounds inside the hole couldn't even be heard clearly. The third son got impatient and shouted into the hole, "Grandpa, have you dug through yet?" After several seconds, a muffled voice came from inside. "I don't know. You stay up there and hold the rope tightly." It was his second brother's voice. Then he heard Old Smoky cough and say, "Keep your voice down, listen. Here is movement." Then there was dead silence. The third son knew that something must have happened down there. He was so scared that he didn't dare to say a word. Suddenly he heard a creepy cackling sound like the croaking of a toad coming from the hole. Then his second brother roared from below, "Third son, pull!" He didn't dare to delay. He kicked the ground and yanked the tail of the earth mole hard, pulling it outwards. After just a few pulls, suddenly something seemed to bite down below, and there was a counterforce pulling the rope back into the robber hole. The third son had never expected this situation and was almost pulled into the hole. In a moment of desperation, he tied the tail around his waist and then fell backward with his whole body. His back was almost at a 30-degree angle to the ground. This was a trick he used when having a tug-of-war with other boys in the village. In this way, his whole body weight was on the rope, and even if it was a mule pulling, he could hold his ground for a while. Sure enough, in this way he was in a stalemate with the thing in the hole. Both sides were struggling, but neither could move an inch. After a stalemate of more than 10 seconds, a gunshot from a pistol was heard from the hole, and then he heard his father shout, "Third son, run!" Then he felt the rope loosen, and the earth mole shot out of the hole as if something was still hanging on it. At that time, the third son didn't care about so much. He knew that something had definitely gone wrong down there. He caught the earth mole and turned around and ran. He ran for more than 2 miles before he dared to stop. He took out the earth mole from his arms and took a look. With a scream of fright, he saw that there was a bloody severed hand hooked on the earth mole. He recognized the appearance of the hand and couldn't help crying. It was clearly his second brother's hand. It seemed that even if his second brother didn't die, he would be disabled. With this, he gritted his teeth and wanted to go back to save his second brother and father. But as soon as he turned around, he saw a blood-red thing squatting behind him, staring straight at him. This third son was no pushover either. He had followed his father in grave robbing for years and had seen many strange things. He knew that anything could happen underground. The most important thing was not to be overly surprised, but to adapt to the situation. After all, no matter how fierce a ghost was, it couldn't be stronger than a living person. Even black or white evil spirits had to abide by the laws of physics. If he fired a whole clip of bullets at it, once it was shot to pieces, there would be nothing to be afraid of. Thinking of this, he hardened his heart. While backing away, he already had a pistol in his hand that he had pulled from his waist. He set it to continuous fire. As long as the blood-red thing made any move, he would fire a hail of bullets at it first. Who knew that at this time the blood-red thing actually stood up? The third son took a closer look and felt his scalp tingle and his stomach churn. It was clearly a skinned person. The whole body was bloody as if the person had squeezed out of his own skin. But such a person could still move. It was really a miracle. Could this be the true appearance of the blood corpse? Thinking about it, the blood corpse bent down and suddenly pounced. In an instant, the third son was face to face with it. The bloody face was right up against his nose, and a sour smell hit him. The third son instinctively fell backward while firing a whole clip of bullets at the thing's chest at close range. Because the distance was too close, the bullets all passed through, splattering blood everywhere and making the thing stagger back several steps. The third son was secretly glad. He then turned around and pulled the trigger at the thing's head. But with a click, the gun jammed. This old pistol was dug out by his second grandfather from a warlord's tomb. It hadn't been used for many years, unfortunately in recent years. Following his father around, he hadn't had time to maintain it, and there were very few opportunities to fire it. Who would have thought that it would jam at this critical moment? The third son was really something. Seeing that the gun wasn't working, he swung his arm with all his might and threw the gun at it. He didn't care whether it hit or not, and just turned around and ran. This time he didn't even dare to look back. He spotted a big tree in front and rushed towards it, thinking that surely it couldn't climb trees. Suddenly he tripped and fell flat on his face, hitting his face on a tree stump. Immediately his nose and mouth were full of blood. The third son slapped the ground hard in anger. Fungallet, how could he be so unlucky? At this time he heard the wind whistling behind him. Punk! That death was coming. He hardened his heart. Well, if he was going to die, he might as well just lie on the ground and not get up unexpectedly. The blood corpse seemed to not see him and actually stepped over him. The bloody soles of its feet immediately left a print on his back. The blood corpse was surprisingly heavy. With one step, the third son felt a sweet taste in his throat and felt as if his bile was being stepped out. Moreover, the place on his back that had been stepped on immediately itched unbearably, and his vision became hazy. He immediately realized that he might have been poisoned, and the poison was very potent. In a daze, he seemed to see that in his second brother's severed hand not far away, there seemed to be something in it. He blinked hard and took a closer look. It turned out to be an ancient silk piece. He thought to himself that since his second brother had risked his life to bring this thing out, it must be something extraordinary. Now he didn't know what had happened to them. Memory. He had to put the thing away properly in case he really died and they found his body. They could find it on him. Then his second brother's severed hand wouldn't be in vain, and he wouldn't have died in vain either. While thinking like this, he struggled to crawl over, forced open his second brother's clenched hand, took the silk piece out of his palm, and stuffed it into his sleeve. At this time his ears started ringing. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of gauze, and his hands and feet started to turn cold. According to his past experience, he must have soiled his pants by now. People who were poisoned by corpses usually died in a very ugly way. What he hoped most now was that the second girl from the neighboring village wouldn't see him like this. He was just muddled and thinking randomly. His mind was no longer under his control. At this time he started to faintly hear that strange cackling sound that he had heard at the entrance of the robber hole again. The third son vaguely felt that something was wrong. During the fight with the blood corpse just now, it had made a sound. Why was it making a sound again now? Could it be that the one just now wasn't the blood corpse? Then what was the thing he saw just now? Unfortunately, at this time he could hardly think anymore. He reflexively raised his head and took a look. He saw a huge, strange face bending down to look at him, and its two pupilless eyes were empty and lifeless.